Empty your mind. Be shapeless, formless, like Skrilla. When you put Skrilla into a bank balance, it becomes the bank balance. When you put Skrilla in Alpha Draft, it becomes Alpha Draft. When you put Skrilla into a contest, it becomes the contest. Now Skrilla can get burned away, and Skrilla can rain down upon you. Come like Skrilla, my friend. That's the end of the Bruce Lee impression. So, adreN, Eric Hogue, I don't actually usually use people's names, but just to identify him, he's not the player from Kazakhstan that probably played for Hellraisers. This adreN is a player who's played since the beginning of CSGO, late 2012 on. He's played in numerous North American teams. He's been to many international LANs. I think he's been to something like 24 LANs in his whole career, including NA LANs in his CSGO career. He was formerly quite a successful player in CSGO for North Americans, I'm informed, and even one of the top NA players as an actual player. And he's someone where I've often called him a bad player relative to the top level. The international level is how I rate players. I don't care if someone's okay in NA or someone's decent in NA. How do you do at international lands? How do you do against the best competition in the world, against the top 10 teams? In that context, he is a bad player. And he's an in-game leader. So the context there is how good of an in-game leader he is. He does that make up for him being a bad player? God, B's a bad player. But he's such a great in-game leader that we look past it. Existence has been a bad player in terms of skills at times in his career, and has been a phenomenal in-game leader, so we look past it. Don't look past it as much now, though, do we? So one of the reasons why I want to make this video is because, in a throwaway manner, I've mentioned many times that adreN is not good, broken down some of the reasons why, but he himself has posted on Reddit saying, essentially, that he thinks the whole reason that the Global Offensive subreddit thinks that he's bad is because I've made up this narrative and I've pushed this agenda and I've created this whole fiction that he's this bad player, and that, you know, essentially it was just me who did it. Even though, if you have to remember, I was only doing stuff that would have been on that Reddit in the last year or two, and I was only on event desks from late 2013 onwards. This is a guy where he already was showing himself to be a pretty bad player long before that. The notion I invented this narrative, as opposed to observed it, chronicled it, and kept reminding people of it and built a model around it, is ludicrous. I mean, first of all, this might sound like a joke, but it's a real statement. The reason why I had to clarify who adreN is because he's not even the best player called adreN. That guy who's the Kazakhstani guy, who now plays in Gambit, I think. Oh no, that was Moo he plays in that. He used to play in Hellraisers, and before that he played in Virtus Pro when the core was in that team instead. AdreN Dragons in the middle. This guy was in one of the best teams in the world, and he was a pretty decent, supportive player. adreN is someone where my joke always is that he's been stealing checks for years. What I mean by that is, how does he keep staying in these top teams? How does he keep doing this? Well, one of the reasons why is he's friends with some of the players, or some of the players doesn't have an argumentative personality, an aggressive personality, so that people don't think of him to kick first. And he's put into these in-game leader roles, so he gets away with not doing as well. In terms of accomplishments, let's be real about adreN, because you have to realise he's been around some fantastic players, but his success is dog shit compared to the players he's played with. So in terms of accomplishments, I looked out and I charted and I found 20 of the 24 lands that he played in. 20 lands were international in some context. Like if they were in ESEA, they had the international teams there. I didn't count ones like just qualifiers for majors, because obviously they're tier 3 teams sometimes from Europe there. So just 20 international lands. In 13 of the 20, he either finished in last place with his team or failed to get out of the group. So almost the same thing in most of those contexts. 13 out of 20 occasions. He's been to 3 majors and he's never gotten out of the group there. He's failed to qualify for 2 majors. He's played with lots of talent. Listen to some of the names he's played with. AZK, Skadoodle, Swag, Nothing, Nitro, Fogly, Hiko, Elige. Yet with all these names he's played with, aside from Elige and Fogly, he's essentially had, and Nitro to a degree, he's essentially had less success than all of those names. They've all had their most success when they weren't playing with adreN. And that's not some coincidence, is it? He did, in terms of accomplishments, win ESEA Season 15 with iBuyPower, beating out Titan, who at the time were the #1 team in the world. Fair enough, credit there. There's a couple of other decent performances he had. ESEA Season 14, the one before that, where he was with Curse.NA. They managed to finish 3rd. Pretty decent result overall. There weren't that many international teams, admittedly. Then we had... what else would there be? Well, he was a stand-in at ESEA Season 17 at the end of 20... let me think, wouldn't that be the end of 2014? I think that was the LAN where he finished, let me think, was that one third as well? Yeah, third as well. That was he standing for iBuyPower. He'd been kicked long before, but they needed a player because obviously they had no Days and Steel at that point in time. And what else? I mean, IEM San Jose finished top 4 because they got to play that Virtus Pro that had no Snacks, who was the best player at the time. Aside from that, not really any big-time accomplishments. That's basically all his best accomplishments to talk of. You look at his history in CSGO. His first team was dynamic, taking over a bunch of players that had been with him in Source. This lineup was AZK, who we know is a very stable player, but a good fragger for a stable player. Nothing, who admittedly has been up and down, but back then in the early days, he was one of the better North American players. Swag obviously developed into one of, at the time, the best NA player. Volcano was decent, but wasn't as good as he was in 1.6. This is a lineup with some skill. He was finishing last place in all his tournaments with them. Then, in, I think it was April of 2013, he's joined the Curse.NA lineup. So now he's playing with Skadoodle, AZK, Anger, Stan. So a couple of names who would go into much more success in iBuyPower with him later. All they get really is the ESEA Season 14. And funnily enough, the ESEA Season 14, where they finished third, he was mega shit at this LAN. He was terrible at this LAN. It was the others that carried this fucking tournament. Then you go to, he joins up with iBuyPower, when essentially they pick up the ex-Curse lineup after some shenanigans and go back and forth. And eventually they get dazed. They bomb the first major. ESEA 15, they win that. They bomb the next major, EMS1 Katowice. They don't do well at that one either. He gets kicked out of the team. I think it was in late March, and they bring in Swag instead. If that's the order. No, because Swag might have come in for the other guy. Anger. So I can't remember who he was kicked for. So, in iBuyPower, like I say, only the one real result. Has a few months where he's not in a team because iBuyPower get better players and go on to much more success. Top 8 at Gfinity G3. They finish second at Faceit. They finish top 8 at ESWC. Then you have, he joins up with Denial at the end of 2014. They become Team Liquid. They bomb out in the group stage at MLG Aspen. They get utterly wrecked by Fnatic there. Faceit stage 1, they come last place, getting eliminated by Immunity, the second best team from fucking Australia. He was ungodly bad as an individual player at Gfinity Spring Masters 2, which if you remember was the one where they had the groups of 5 teams and you played 2 maps against each team. He was fucking god-awful at this LAN. Faceit Stage 2, group stage elimination again. Sevo Professional Season 7 LAN Finals was where they were in the group with Mouse Sports, Cloud9, and then a CLG that didn't even have FNS, the in-game leader. They had Sanks standing in. Last place at this tournament. He was dog shit at PGL Season 1 finals, where his team finished last place, even though they won a map off Fnatic and did well on a map against Virtus Pro. He had an improved run of form at a bunch of the LANs that were in NA. So there was the 2 NA LANs of iBuyPower, adreN, and then IEM San Jose was an international one, but he had a decent performance there. ESL, ESEA Pro League Season 2 finals, he was bad at. So you can see there's not a good run for this guy in terms of an individual player, or even as a leader in terms of the results he's getting, despite having a lot of talent in his career. And in terms of his skill set, this guy was always a poor fragger. Like, what people don't realise is, he wasn't even the in-game leader in fucking iBuyPower, and he was dog shit then. So, Days was the in-game leader then. He was the worst player by far. He's been an in-game leader of other teams, and he's been a bad player and bad in-game leader. I went and looked up his stats. First of all, people think of him as an AWPer, right? Because AWP's the main weapon for him. He's a bad AWPer. I made the joke before, yeah, you can be an AWPer, but to me an AWPer is someone who gets an AWP and kills people with the AWP. That's why he's an AWPer. He's just an AWPer because he runs around with an AWP in his hands. I mean, the joke, credit to Dazed, he's the one who came up with it, that his nickname is, he should be the 5k decoy grenade, because all he does is make the AWP sound and then die and not get kills. I mean, the reason it's a 5k decoy grenade, because that rolls off the tongue better than 4750 decoy grenade. Like, that doesn't work as well as a witty comment, does it? I looked up his stats. So on LAN, adreN, in all of CSGO, has 594 AWP kills. Now, 594. Let's just think about this for a second. He's played 24 LANs. I looked up the number of maps he's played. 233 maps. So let's have a quick look, shall we? I mean, obviously, I won't do the calculation for that, because he won't use the AWP in every single team, fair enough. But 24 LANs, and he hasn't even got 600 AWP kills. Of his 594 AWP kills, 417 were all on the CT side. And yet, On T-side, do you see adreN AWPing? Yeah, you see him AWP quite a lot, don't you? Yeah, he's got less than 200 kills with the AWP on T-side in his entire career. With the rifles, in terms of the M4 and the M4A4 and the M4A1 silence, combined together, he has 315 LAN kills. Yet, since he's played 233 LAN maps, that means he's averaged 1.35 M4 kills per map. Right, think about that for a second. For his career, he has averaged less than 2 M4 kills per map he has played on LAN. This is ungodly dog shit fragging. Now, remember what I said, you can be a shit fragger if you're a good in-game leader. So is he a good in-game leader? No. Which of his teams were ever famous for good strats? Dynamic? No. Curse.NA? Definitely not. iBadPower? Oh wait, he wasn't the in-game leader of iBadPower, was he? Team Liquid? Certainly not. Team Liquid are famous for having talent and never being able to make use of it and never being able to execute and call their way out of 14-14 type games and just falling apart and being good on CT sides and being dog shit on T sides and getting ultra wrecked by European teams and never finding a way to counter them or grind back into the game. What changed Team Liquid was not in-game leading by adreN. It wasn't even James joining as a coach, because when James joined as a coach, they still had a bunch of bad lines. What changed Team Liquid, if you're being fair, is you look at it, Hiko joining. Hiko joining changed up the roles, and suddenly Elige was better as an entry fragger. He developed. Then that unlocked Nitro, who is now more aggressive, because now Hiko's taking up more of the passive roles, not a pure lurker, but more of a lurker. Now you have Fogly's the one put more into a lurking role. He's playing this aspect. All this set in place, the aspects which made the team better. And if you look at their best performances, it came from this dynamic of the T-side attacks. It was never having really sick players in terms of strats, like everyone ran a certain strat and they broke the game down, they read the game. That was never what anyone was talking about. In fact, what's mad is, like I said, he wasn't even the in-game leader of iBadPower. But I actually think that's where he was his best tactically, because it seemed like from talking to some of those players, he was a good secondary caller. Like if Daze was in-game leading, but adreN saw something, or he had one little thing he picked up on, then he could give a good call and Daze could call it, and then they could get a game-winning play. Now what's funny is when he joined Denial, he actually took Daps's spot, who was the in-game leader at the time. And actually, from looking at Daps later on in Elevate, looking at him in Optic now, I think you can make a strong case. Daps is a shit player, but Daps is a way better in-game leader than adreN. It seems like his calling style makes a lot more sense and has been able to have a lot more success relative to the players they played with. Daps played next to no fucking good players. Just a few of those guys who were in the Denial team before they became top players. My analogy for adreN would be, I'm going to give another game analogy here. So there's a player in League of Legends who was called Chowster, and he played for the team CLG. And the thing about this guy was, much like adreN, in the early days, he was a top player. When the pool of players was much smaller, pool of players in Source much smaller, he was a top player back then. But then in latter years, not a very good player, but respected for his mind. Now, outside of the game, Chowster is a brilliant mind. Even to this day, I bet he could analyse the game and come up with incredible things and notice little nuances and tell you about trends that will come up in the future. He used to be very, very smart in this respect and on breaking the game down in terms of looking at a game outside of it, just watching the VOD and looking at what a player did. So smart, just like adreN is. Here's the thing that frustrates me about adreN. I got to know him, by watching him be shit on LAN, but then I watched loads of his videos. And his videos are great stuff. He's breaking down smokes. He's explaining why you would do a smoke conceptually. He's on point with a lot of the shit he says. I've seen him break down VODs, and he made some really interesting points and observations and bits of analysis. Problem is, like Chowster's famous thing was he would try to be the shot caller in the game, and he would fuck it up, and he would make the wrong call, and he would choke. What would happen is that this, paralysis by analysis, as the saying goes. He would try to concentrate on it, and he'd be trying to figure out the perfect answer, but because he doesn't have much time and he's on the spot, he would be too busy trying to figure out the perfect answer and not just make the simple call, not just read the game well, not be in tune with what was happening, be able to read it on the fly. That's what it feels like the problem with adreN is. He can't engage that intelligent mind in the game somehow. I don't know why. I've asked people why. They've never come up with a reason, his teammates, but they can't implement it the same way. Now, I don't think it's that he can't be a pro player. Now, he can't be on top teams like Team Liquid or a Cloud9 or elite level teams like iBadPower. He can't be on these teams because there's just going to be a waste of time. He's going to be an anchor. But this guy could be very valuable to younger teams or to lesser teams. Go to the 5th or 6th or 7th best teams in NA, and then nowadays they have salaries, by the way. They could use a player like him to give them the basics, to play a supportive role, to support people, to help the young guys develop. He could be a team player in this sense. He just can't be on the top teams. I mean, that's adreN. There you go. There's reality. If someone doesn't agree, feel free to work on your own video, mate.